The first non-diatonic chords are secondary dominants. The best explanation for the secondary dominance is coming from Arnold Schoenberg's explanation. What he says: he says that the expansion of harmonic progressions is based on the relationships between the diatonic chords. In the first video, we talked about the harmonic relationships in terms of the chord scale, diatonic chords, right? But in this video, I will explain the source of secondary dominant and also chord scale explanations for secondary dominant. And what Arnold Schoenberg says, we took the necessary and sufficient conditions, which is structural progressions based on fourths and fifths. It means that when we have that chord progression, we have very clear perception of tonality, right? For example, here G dominant 7, then C major 7. It symbolizes the end of section or end of the piece. It's very important in terms of structural relationship. And we use that relationship to expand our harmonic progressions and harmonic relationships. Let's start with the diatonic chords and then apply to secondary dominants, the base of fourths and fifths. We have diatonic chords C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, and A minor 7. For the sake of pedagogy, we don't use the B minor 7 flat 5 because when you use B minor 7 flat 5, we call this the extended tonality. It creates kind of ambiguous sound. But at the beginning, we just focus on the more stable chord structures. But let's write the functional values: 2 minor 7, 3 minor 7, 4 major 7, 5 dominant 7, and 6 minor 7. Okay, we take our first model for the structural progression based on fifths and fourths, which is G dominant 7 to C major 7. This is our first dominant chord. We call this primary dominant. And this is 5-7, and it resolves to C major 7. In the progression that I played for you, you can get this sense of the ending. But when we want to expand our vocabulary, we took the same principle applied to other diatonic chords. This is 5-7, right? 5-7 to 1 major 7. If took this model and apply it to our next diatonic chords, we will get the first non-diatonic chords, which is the secondary dominance. And look at the distance between 5 dominant 7, 1 major 7. This is 50 relationship, right? And took that distance, applied to D minor 7, we have a dominant 7. Why? When we apply to D minor 7, we have the fifth relationship. That's why we have A, but we took the same chord quality, which is dominant, and we got a dominant 7. In terms of functional relationship, we write 5-7 of 2 because it is related with the D minor 7. When we take this model and apply the rest of the diatonic chords, we have B dominant 7, 5-7 of 3. We have C dominant 7, 5-7 of 4. We have D dominant 7, 5-7 of 5. And then we have E dominant 7, which is 5-7 of 6. Okay, this is we call this secondary dominant chords. This is our primary dominant. Actually, when we have this progression, it creates a kind of small distortion about the progressions, but not in terms of the bad quality. It's a kind of direction. You just have little zigzag about the chord progressions, because when you have the chord progressions, like dominant chord progression, it sounds more straight, right? Like C major 7, E minor 7, and A minor 7, D minor 7, G dominant 7, and C major 7. There is no structural changes in terms of chord qualities. It looks very straight, plain, right? When you use the secondary dominant, that gives the color of the changing little direction, but it goes back to the main root. This is the most important quality for the secondary dominant. We call this tonicization, because in terms of local relationship, for example, when we have A dominant 7, when it resolves to D minor 7, D minor 7 sounds temporary tonic. That's why we call this tonicization. In terms of graphic, when we have the diatonic chords, our structure sounds like very straight root. But when we have secondary dominant, we have little tonicization points. Like A dominant 7 to D minor 7, B dominant to E minor 7. This is our resolution point. And that gives us the color to change the melodic and the harmonic progressions in terms of the dynamics. Let's look at some of the chord progressions. When we have the C major, then we have E dominant. This is 5-7 of 6, then 6. Then we have 5-7 of 2 and 2, 5, 1. That creates very subtle difference in terms of chord progression. That gives a little different color about the chord progressions, but it has very, very important structural references for our harmonic expansions, because we used one of the necessary and sufficient conditions, which is structural progression based on fourths and fifths. Don't forget this, because in the rest of the, especially the tonal harmony explanation, that's going to be our main principle. Okay, this is secondary dominant explanations. But what about the chord scale theory? For the chord scale theory, actually, we use the same method. This is primary dominant, and we use mixolydian for the primary dominant, which is, for example, G mixolydian. The mixolydian for G dominant 7. We'll take this, also apply the same model for the chord scale or the rest of the chord scales, but there's a little problem about the tension notes. I will explain it. For the chord scale of the secondary dominants, we'll use the mixolydian. Okay. And let's talk about A dominant 7. It has a mixolydian, but in terms of the tension relationships, we have to take tonality into consideration, because that relationship defines our tension notes. For mixolydian, when we have the mixolydian for A dominant 7, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, and G. This is A mixolydian. Okay, there is no problem about here. But there's a problem about the pedagogical purposes. And this is our chord tones, 7. And what about the tensions? And to have the direction for the tensions, when we want to use the tensions, and when we want to be away from the tonality, you can use, for example, F sharp here, because F sharp, it doesn't have the diatonic relationship with the C major. This is our main tonality. If you want to be away from, if you want to create the musical expression, and also if you want to have less diatonic relationship, you can use F sharp. If you want to close to the tonality, if you want to close to C major, try to use the diatonic tones for the secondary dominant chords tensions. And when we have a mixolydian, our tonality is like this. I mean, we are trying to be away from, we are trying to create the musical impression, not in terms of diatonic relationships. That's why we have tensions, tension 9. This is scale for avoided note. Avoided notes comes from mixolydian relationship, and this is tension 13. But if you want to go back to, if you want to create an atmosphere going back to the C tonality, use the diatonic tension notes. Then we have A, B, C sharp, D, E, F natural, and G. Then we have 1, 3, 5, sorry, this is flat 7 here, and the tension notes, tension 9, tension flat 13. And this is our avoided notes. And here we have, if you want to close to C major, use the mixolydian flat 13. But if you want to create a non-diatonic color in your melodic or chord progression styles, use the typical mixolydian tension notes for your secondary dominant. You can apply this relationship to all of secondary dominants. And when you have this, if you want to close the tonality, you have the mixolydian flat 13 for A dominant 7, mixolydian flat 9 flat 13 for B dominant 7. You have typical mixolydian for C dominant 7, D dominant 7. For D dominant 7, use the mixolydian, and for the E dominant 7, use the mixolydian flat 9 and flat 13. This is the structural explanation about the secondary dominants and also chord scales for the secondary dominants. As I said before, if you understand the differences between the colors, then you can have full control over your composition and improvisation process. That's why I am always strongly emphasizing on the differences and the similarities between the chord structures and the melodic structures. And we'll have the same approach in our next video, which is the famous 2-5-1. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.